We're going to talk about one of the most controversial topics, perhaps in the world, not really, crimp and seal butt connectors. A lot of people ask what brand I use. This is the brand I use. They're a marine grade, crimp and seal butt connector. Just your standard run-of-the-mill butt connector. You guys have probably seen me use these hundreds of times. And I thought of this because I had to order more to refill my tray. Now I carry these in red, blue, and yellow, your three most common. They make this brand, they make in eyelets and all kinds of stuff. Now these things tend to get a bit of a bad rap. And there are some pitfalls to using them, which I want to cover. So we're going to go over the proper way here real quick. Got me just a standard piece of 18 gauge. Got our Knipex strippers. Strip off just a little bit. These things work pretty fantastic. I don't know where you can buy them, but if you find them, they're good. And then this is where things go wrong. It's during the crimping process. So we put it in there. I mean, it's a great way to do it. I mean, almost every connection on your car is made with, crimping versus soldering. Most crimpers have two different portions of the crimper. You've got this part up here that has that little peg sticking out. That is for non-insulated, like all metal, like barrel crimps. And then you have this portion right here where it's kind of smoother, and that is for insulated portions. Now, even though these are snap-on and they're overly expensive, they're not really the best tool for the job because this is kind of a one-size-fits-most for the non-insulated part, or for the insulated part rather. Okay, now we'll take a look. I dug these out of the archive. These are some SK ones. You can see here they have an insulated portion to crimp for 14 to 18 gauge and for 10 to 12. So this is a little bit better. And then up here they have the uninsulated crimper, which is just like the snap-on one. It has that little peg on it. And that's where people usually go wrong because they use it to crimp these. And what it will do, it'll actually pierce the insulation. Now these are pretty resilient, so this may not work, but I'll give it a little extra squeeze. And you can see when you crimp it, it kind of pokes a hole through it. Now more often than not, it'll self-heal when we go to heat it up. Sometimes, however, it'll leave a little tiny hole right there. And that's where these connectors will fail, is when somebody crimps it wrong. You're supposed to use a heat gun, I'm sure, but everybody uses their mini torch, let's be honest. Okay, so I heated this one up. I'll let that solidify, and then we'll see if where I crimp that improperly, you can see that big old dent in there. If that exposes metal, well, then this connection is just as good as twisting the wires and throwing some tape on it, because that's going to allow salt and everything to get in there, and this is just going to turn into a big green crusty mess. Now the proper way to crimp them is, like I say, using the insulated portion of your tool. When you use these here snap-on ones, on the smaller, the red ones here, the 22 to 18 gauge ones, it actually works pretty well. If you use that on the like the blue connectors, it has a tendency to over crimp and kind of pinch the sides, leaving the sides exposed to metal, and it doesn't work at all on the yellow ones. If you want the absolute best way to do it, use the actual crimper that's made for the specific butt connectors. This is made by the same company, or at least it's made for the same company that makes these. However the heck you pronounce it, I don't know. All right, now that this has cooled down, I believe this is exposed to bare metal. If it's not, it's very close. Yes, it is. So that is going to fail. Oops, let me put this down before we catch something on fire. That crimp 100% guaranteed is going to fail. That one's going to get salt in it. And if you're not really paying attention, it just looks like it might be, I don't know, a little bit off. You're like, oh yeah, I made a good crimp, heated it up. But this crimp is 100% going to fail. Now let's cut this off. We'll do it properly. I'll show you the difference. And then that's all we have to talk about. These things fail because they get used wrong. Here, we'll just pick a different one. The good versus the bad, I'll show you. We'll slide that little guy in there. We will use the tool that is specifically made for this job. We'll stick it on the red part. These have a smooth jaw crimp. There it is. Flattens her out, both sides. Get our button pushed down here for safety. Like I say, these crimps have the adhesive or sealer or whatever it is. They got something in there, some kind of goo that oozes out. That seems to work really well, just like the good heat shrink, you know. All right, we'll let that baby cool down, and then we'll have a look to see what this one looks like. Well, it's still cooling, but you can see. Let's try to get that to focus. Spin around slow. We haven't busted through the outer layer. Alright, so she's perfectly sealed. You always tell it to Monday morning. The phone never quits ringing. And then, on the contrary, there's the bad one. You can probably catch a little glimmer of the metal in there through that little poke. Okay, this one's junk. This one's good. It's all about how you do it, baby. And that's as simple as that. You could probably see, or maybe you made the observation of the little ooze coming out the end there, right on the very bottom. That adhesive, that stuff gets pretty gummy. Try to not fiddle with these when they're cooling. So that's it. I believe that people don't like these because they use them improperly. They're incorrectly crimped. At least that's been my experience. I've posted pictures of these on the Insta. Maybe not this particular brand, but of, you know, this style crimp connector that has failed. And I've done it myself. I'm guilty of it. Yeah, using the wrong crimper, over crimping them, and it sucks because you make the wiring repair, and you got to be honest with yourself when you look at it and you see that little piece of metal. It kind of makes you want to say, let's just pretend we didn't see that. But you have to go through and fix it. So make sure you're using a correct crimping tool. It doesn't have to be this one, even though this thing's super cheap to buy, and it works great. But just make sure that you're using the correct portion of your crimper. That's all I got to tell you. And if you're using the overpriced snap-on ones, which work great, these are probably my favorite, be cautious when using the non-insulated portion, because you can cut through it. And even if you buy the cheap Chinese knockoffs on the Amazon, it's the same thing. These are just as handy as the snap-on ones, but they have the same flaw. You know, they'll pinch the ends of the... I'll show you. It won't do it on this because these are... You see how that flattens out? Let's see, let that focus. See how that kind of flattened out, gave that wings, even though I used the correct side of the crimper. That one will heat up and self-heal just fine. But if that was a blue connector, where this pinches it on the sides, it's gonna expose it to bare metal. And if it's a yellow one, forget about it. It ain't gonna work. We'll use this one on the 14 to 18 side. Give that a squeeze. And you can see how that kind of flattens it out. That one will self-heal and be just fine. Of course, there was no wire in there, but I could show you. Yeah, like I say, the trouble I find is the non-insulated side. Of course, we've talked about this enough. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Let that baby cool down, but we'll be able to see right on there. There's not going to be any poke holes except for the one there at the very bottom. So the bad one. Otherwise, she's good to go. So that's it, folks. Don't get down on them until you try them. And if you do try them, make sure you're using the right tool. That's it. You have a great day.